to give us the introduction to Culture Days.
Great. We're just going to give you some brief information about Culture Days in itself, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and everyone's aware of what the event entails. Aubrey, could you advance the slide, please? Yeah. So Culture Days is a national collaborative volunteer movement. Its purpose is really to raise the awareness, accessibility, and participation of the public in arts and culture. It's sort of like participation for the arts, where we want people to get out and try something new that they might not have ever done before, and then hopefully find something they love and want to be engaged with the other 362 days of the year. This year is the 7th annual Culture Days, and the weekend takes place on the last Friday of September and the following weekend. So that's important to note in your forward planning, because the last Friday, depending on where it falls, Culture Days could take place on the last weekend in September or the first weekend in October. So it might fall on and off other sort of tourism events happening in your community, if it's a studio tour or a fall festival. So that's something definitely to be aware of. Absolutely anyone can put on a Culture Days activity. There's only 4 requirements to participate. So the activity has to be free for the public to participate in. That is so there are no barriers to participation. As I said, we want people to try something new. We don't want any obstacles to that. While the activity that the public is invited to participate in has to be free, activity organizers can certainly sell their products, their artworks, tickets to their upcoming season, sign people up for their classes, and people can have a donation box. They just can't have a suggested amount, or they can pair with fundraising activities like a silent auction or something, but the activity itself has to be free. All activities have to take place on the Culture Days weekend, so that's important. If you have something that reoccurs, like a 4th Friday, something that happens monthly, you can put that information in the activity description, but the only dates and times that the registration system will accept are those 3 days of the Culture Days weekend. And here, this is really important, the activities have to be interactive or participatory in some way. So this is a really broad definition. It can include demos, artist talks, behind the scenes tours, creative collaboration, creation, where the public actually get to help make something. But this is really what sets Culture Days apart, that they're hands-on activities. People actually get to try something new. Activities also have to be registered on the Culture Days website. This is key. If the activity is not on the website, first of all, you don't get any of the benefit from the combined national campaign, which drives the public to the website to plan their weekends. But also, it's not an official Culture Days activity, because we can't find information on you and promote you and help get the word out about your activity. So those are the 4 main criteria. The reason that we have those dates legislated is that Culture Days nationally is actually based on this very successful model out of Quebec. They're actually celebrating their 20th anniversary this year, and the dates are legislated. So the dates are legislated in Quebec to be the last Friday of September and the following weekend. So that's why we have those dates happening across the country. And I also like to point out here that Culture Days is really a program of the arts and cultural sector. It was really the Canadian Arts Summit who investigated the model to see whether it would work in the rest of Canada. So that's key as well. We work really collaboratively. We don't have a hierarchical structure, so there is a National Culture Days office in Montreal. Here in Ontario, the Culture Days office is located in Toronto. We have a small staff. We have 2.5 staff members, all of us on the webinar today, and we have some interns that join us in the summer. We are really driven by a task force. We have a task force of key members, leaders in the arts and cultural community from important organizations like the Ontario Library Association, the Ontario Museum Association, Theatre Ontario, for example, and also community organizers. So the people who are organizing all of the events happening in their community. And those community organizers really set the direction for where we need to go as an organization. So those community organizers can belong to an organization. They can be municipal cultural workers, they can be parts of local arts councils or arts associations, or they can be volunteers who just have enthusiasm and want to carry out culture days in their community. Then we have the individual activity organizers, the people who put on their activities, and then the public who comes out. So it really is a collaborative structure where we all work together to make this very large national event happen. There's a lot of information in this infographic, and again, as Aubrey mentioned, the slides will be available later. So what I just want to really point out here is the wide range of types of sectors participating. So you can see under type nonprofit, charity, performing visual arts organizations, heritage and cultural industries, independent artists, education, businesses, and municipalities. So a very wide range of organizer types getting involved, and from a broad spectrum of disciplines, everything from visual arts to crafts to multidisciplinary and heritage events, literature, and architecture, design, First Nations activities, film, video, culinary arts, comedy. So we really are hitting the full spectrum in terms of arts and cultural sectors. So again, you can peruse the other information on this slide at your leisure later. Just to give you a sense of the campaign timeline, so we do kind of launch in the spring with information sessions, of which this webinar is one. Then the registration campaign launches in the spring, and we do have some incentives. Sometimes these are directed at communities, and sometimes these are directed at the individual activity organizer level. So there is an incentive that if people register their activities today, they have a chance to win a professionally edited promo video to support and promote their activity. Then in early September, the marketing and media campaign really ramps up, and we do have an activity registration deadline by which people need to be registered on the website. That is September 19th, although we do encourage people to register much earlier than that. Our suggested deadline is July 31st to give us proper time to promote and market the activities, but the last date which people can actually technologically register on the website is that September 19th date. Then we have the Culture Days weekend, and then afterwards we do surveys and content collection, collect people's photographs, testimonials. So that's just a rough overview of how the campaign looks this year.
Thank you, Catherine. So that's the basics, and we encourage you to take a look at the Culture Days website to find out a lot more. In particular, you can take a look at our participation guide if you're interested in organizing an activity yourself. What I'm going to do now is go through a couple examples of communities who have had some real successes, especially in terms of attracting some tourism around the Culture Days weekend. So the first example is Muskoka. In 2010, as a region, there was only 10 activities registered. But the following year, as you can see there, there was 116 activities registered. So this is an enormous increase of over 1,000%. And how it happened was a combination of factors. First, Catherine went out to an information session, like she mentioned, in the spring that was hosted by the town of Huntsville, and had a range of members of the cultural community there finding out about Culture Days, like you are today. And then we had this really gung-ho local volunteer named Pam McKenzie, who followed up on that information session by personally inviting arts and cultural collectives, cultural centers, individual artists and craftspeople to really participate in Culture Days, because she believed deeply in it, and her previous experiences of it, that personal touch really made a difference. And then, following that amazing volunteer lead, the town of Huntsville offered their support in terms of marketing and PR, but they didn't actually have to spend a lot. They've reported to me that they spent just over $1,400, and they also contributed staff time to helping coordinate promotions. Then when we saw this growth happening, as Catherine mentioned, the registration happens over the summer. We saw this huge spike starting in Muskoka. And so then we took some of our own digital marketing dollars and increased them specifically in the Muskoka area on muskokaregion.com. We also asked our publicists that we work with provincially to pitch the Muskoka story to local, regional, and provincial media. And then the mayor got on board too as a supporter. He actually held a press conference. You can see here he's making candles at a Culture Days activity. And so what were the results? Well, they had an attendance of over 5,000 people across the region, with the majority happening in Huntsville. We encountered a couple who came to the Ghost of Tom Thompson activity. They traveled all the way from Oakville, so that's over 560 kilometers round trip, specifically to attend just this Culture Days activity. That's a long way to go, so they also stayed overnight at a hotel. They obviously bought meals. They might have done some shopping and so on. So you can see how it can have ripple effects. Even though Culture Days is a free event, it can have real economic impacts in your region. They had a number of news articles. They had a television interview, 3 radio interviews, including a province-wide coverage, and they had considerable social media. So for a fairly rural and small community, they had a very large impact through a combination of through collaboration between local volunteers, the municipality, and the Provincial Culture Days office. So another example I wanted to point to, also a smaller community, Brockville. Last year was their first time they participated in Culture Days, and they focused everything on a street closure on their main street. They reported an estimated attendance over 2,000 people, and especially the Brockville Tourism Center said they had a record number of visitors that weekend. They were really, really pleased. They achieved some international media coverage by getting some pretty extensive radio interviews on the upstate New York radio station, which highlighted how wonderful a destination Brockville is, especially that their main street is very attractive and a very interesting place to visit. I'm not going to go through great detail on these quotes, but this is some feedback we got from the partners in Brockville. It was really a collaboration of the Brockville Artists Cooperative, which is sort of an an arts council, as well as the BIA and the tourism department. And they're ramping up their collaboration this year. They've reported that they're planning to do pre-event promotions at the Tall Ships Festival, which is coming through Brockville just a couple of weeks before the Culture Days weekend. And they're doing a whole lot of other participations. But it's interesting to note that they spent an extremely small amount on their promotions, but had a really, really big impact. Now I wanted to draw attention to the biggest, or one of the biggest examples of Culture Days in London, Ontario. They draw over 25,000 people each year. They do this through a strategy of collaborating, clustering their activities into hubs, and the Arts Council is really the lead organizer and supporter. They produce a very extensive marketing campaign in London that includes over 10,000 map guides, 5,000 posters, and then a $50,000 investment on advertising, online, billboards, print, transit ads, etc. This is quite an exceptional example for Culture Days, but you can see how they've integrated the Culture Days designs into all their local marketing materials. I'm quickly going to go through our audience survey data and demographics so you have an idea of who actually comes out to Culture Days. So every year we do surveys of public attendees, and these are the top 5 brand attributes that they report and associate with Culture Days. So the top one is creative, but also community is a very strong attribute. Fun, free is not surprising, and also important to note, very family friendly. When we drill down into the demographics, every year Culture Days across Ontario attracts over 500,000 people. It's heavily weighed towards females with 79% and males representing 20%. The age breakdown is fairly spread across the full spectrum of ages. It's also, for arts, attracting a very diverse audience. We have 23% of Culture Days attendees report that they are newcomers to Canada, including 20% of those have reported they've been here for less than 5 years. We also have a diverse population attending Culture Days in other ways. 4% identify as First Nations, Aboriginal, Métis, or Inuit. 23% identify as visible minorities. And 41% are new to Culture Days. So that's really getting to the goal of attracting new audiences to arts and culture. And also important to note that 33% brought children under 18 with them to Culture Days. So that's really getting to that family-friendly aspect. I'm not going to go through these slides, but at a later point you can take a look at them. What they're really getting at is the main goals of Culture Days to deepen engagement and participation in arts and culture. I just wanted to draw attention to the middle one. 79% experienced greater pride in their community. And with respect to tourism, that's relevant because people with pride in their community are more likely to invite friends and family to come to their community and share what's on offer there. And Culture Days is having an impact throughout the rest of the year. So people report, because of attending Culture Days, that they, through the rest of the year, attended more arts and cultural events. They visited more art galleries and studios. They volunteered, took classes, donated to arts and cultural organizations, and they even bought more art. So those are impacts that are having across the arts and cultural sector and across the economy. Okay, so now we're going to get into specifically Culture Days' tourism numbers. This is really our first foray into tourism. Previously, the messaging around Culture Days has been very focused on come out and see the arts and culture in your own backyard. But because over the past couple years, more and more municipalities are working with their tourism industries to promote Culture Days, we thought at a provincial level it's time for us to also make some moves into tourism. And so with the support of an Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, we are embarking on our first full-fledged tourism strategy, which includes reaching out to all of you to build relationships with the tourism sector. So we're really very pleased to see everyone on this call and to initiate these relationships. It's also going to involve doing targeted marketing, digital, print, and other means, as well as with a specific aim at an interregional focus, so getting people to do day trips or overnight trips within Ontario. And we'll be promoting the destination hotspots, so places where there are a high concentration of Culture Days activities registered, so that they become really places for travelers to go and see multiple things all at once. I'm now going to hand over the mic to Jessa, who's going to go through some general cultural tourism stats and then specifically the Culture Days tourism.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to present and share some of these numbers with you. Drawing on some of our own research as well as from the Ministry of Culture, Tourism and Sport and the Ontario Arts Council, Business for the Arts, there's some general tourism numbers in case you're not aware of the contributions of arts and culture in Ontario. At 3.9 billion, GDP from cultural tourism in Ontario is a significant portion of the Ontario economy, with 61,000 jobs as well directly supported through cultural tourism. In 2012, there were over 15 million trips to arts and culture destinations by Ontarians in Ontario, which is approximately 10% of all tourist trips in that year. So I'm not considering US or overseas or other parts of Canada in that tourism numbers. What I find really striking is that 1/5 or 20% and 2-to-1 ratio of arts and culture is related to, or tourism is related to arts and culture tourism. So in 2010, 20% of all overnight trips in Ontario were by arts and culture. So they're going and attending an event and staying overnight. And they also spend twice as much as anybody else on a typical overnight spend. So they're looking at $667 per trip in Ontario compared to $374 by other typical overnight tourists in the province. 34% of the general public also prefer to attend arts events. So this is looking at new audiences that aren't necessarily avid arts attenders. 34% prefer to attend the arts compared to only 29% who prefer sports. And we all think sports as being very popular. So arts is doing very well. We have a quick poll here with 2 questions. Do you specifically promote cultural attractions, destinations, or events as a part of your tourism strategy in your region? And who is your target tourism market for your cultural attractions? There's one poll at a time, so that we're going to do the first one. Do you specifically promote cultural attractions as a part of your strategy? We'll give you another 30 seconds to answer. Okay, that's everybody. And we'll do the second poll. Who is your target tourism market for your cultural attractions?
Yeah.
Just thank you, everyone. We'll tell you the results of the poll a little bit later in the talk today. So we're going to continue just with some of the tourism numbers and how Culture Days activities are distributed through the different tourism regions. So this is a map of the province with the size of the circle is related to the number of activities that have been hosted in that region since 2010. So Toronto has hosted the largest number of 1,518 Culture Days activities since 2010, followed by Southwest Ontario at 1,000. And then in the heat are sort of a few there around 900, 800 in Central and Southwestern Ontario. Overall, there's been a 129% increase in the annual Culture Days activities across the province since 2010. But there's been some really highlighted activities in growth in the Algonquin-Muskoka-Parry Sound region with 1,900% increase there. Also, some pretty stunning increases happening in southeastern Ontario with 653%. 300% in Hamilton, Halton and Brant, 388% in Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma. So some really exciting stories happening there. Looking at the impact in spending, tourism spending by, again, this is all by Ontarians in Ontario going to Culture Days events in 2015. We have a projected impact of 505,000 participants across the province. Of the people surveyed, 26% or 131,000 brought visiting friends or family to attend their Culture Days events. 24% attended Culture Days in another community. Of those that traveled to another community to attend Culture Days, 85% or 103,000 spent money in that community when they're there. 62% of all participants, or 313,000, expressed a willingness to attend Culture Days in another community in 2016. And there's a big cross-section of how far they're willing to travel. 44% were willing to travel less than 40 kilometers, but a significant number there, 24% between 80 and 150 or more kilometers, and 21% at 40 to 79 kilometers is very encouraging. People are willing to travel quite a long distance to attend a Culture Days event. Then looking at the estimated impact, looking at that 103,000 that actually traveled and spent money, we're estimating a $6.9 million total impact of travelers. The TREAM model from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport suggested there might be a $13 million estimated impact, including 5.8 million in direct and 11.5 million in indirect. So we're not that far off on our own estimate based on a survey of how people are traveling and spending money. So I'm going to pass the mic on back to Aubrey.
Okay, thank you, Jessa. So now I'm just going to briefly talk about some features that Culture Days has that makes it very attractive to tourism, or that responsive to tourist behavior. So some of the major trends that I'm sure you're all aware of is that there's a desire by travelers to have an authentic experience. So Culture Days offers travelers an unparalleled chance to meet directly with artists and cultural creators, cultural organizations, talk with them, and take part hands-on in direct activities. So really, I don't think there's anything more authentic than that experience. It also showcases the distinctly local character of a community's culture. So as we saw in some of those previous examples, activities are really tailored to what is happening in their community. So for instance, Brock has a focus on history and heritage in their community, since they are a very old community and loyalist community, whereas Muskoka has a very outdoorsy focus. So it's really putting a spotlight on what you have to offer in your community. Second, travelers are hyper-connected and want to share their experience. As we will go through in a little bit, Culture Days has a very strong social media presence and very high engagement levels. But it's also, as you can see in this really fun photo, it's very photogenic, it's active, it's shareable. When you're doing something hands-on instead of passively watching something, you're far more likely to take a picture of yourself or your friend and share that on social media. So it really drives that desire by travelers to connect and share their experiences. We've got some tools that are also very, very useful for travelers. The first one is the Find Activities Near Me feature. On the very, very top center of the Culture Days website, you will find this button, Find Activities Near Me, and it allows you to get a geolocated search from your mobile device anywhere you are of what are the activities happening nearest you. So if you're on the road and you haven't really planned your trip, you can for the Culture Days weekend, you can immediately find out what's the nearest thing happening to you. Then there's also the Bright Spot Scheduler. This is a tool we've had for a number of years. It's a customizable itinerary tool that lets you select activities and put them into your own schedule, and then export it. You can export it as a PDF, as a calendar item for iCal or Outlook, and you can also email it to yourself or to other people. It's also a really, really handy promotional tool for hub locations, destination spots, or for a community as a whole, because you can do your own personalized schedule, but you can also select activities based on a theme or a location. So if you could select all the activities happening at one destination point, say a museum and heritage site, and they're hosting a dozen activities. All those dozen activities can be put into a Bright Spot and then exported as I said, as a PDF. That PDF can be linked to on their website. As a tourism organization that's supporting that destination, you could then share that out through your various communications channels. So it's a really useful tool and super easy and adaptable. So we're at 45 minutes on this session. I'm going to quickly go through our marketing and media so that we can have some time for Q&A. So this graphic illustrates the very multi-armed marketing and PR campaign that we do every year. It's a mix of owned, earned, and advertising. As I just mentioned, in the owned, there's the Bright Spot schedule, and we will be using that also to put out a special highlight activities list. Last year, for instance, we did highlight activities for each of the regions that have a OMTPC information center, and we sent them those lists. They were available to tourists visiting to those centers. We're going to be doing that again and expanding that out a bit. Other things, actually, we have a little bit more time than I realized. So also we have the Ontario Culture Days social media channels, the blog, our own, the microsite, the on.culturedays.ca takes you specifically to Ontario news on the website. We have a news email newsletter. And then earned encompasses, of course, media coverage, other people's social media. We have a lot of partner organizations that share Culture Days news out on their own newsletters and websites. And then we have a very extensive advertising campaign that's multi-channeled and multi-layered. It includes broadcast. The national media partner is Bell Media CTV, and you will start to see television ads running on CTV starting in August, and they really ramp up through September. There's also Bell-owned radio stations that run Culture Days ads on there. Then in Ontario, we have provincial partners with Metroland Media, which owns community newspapers extensively through central and southern Ontario, as well as Pattison One Stop, who own transit advertising and also mall and residential digital advertising. So we're planning an extensive digital campaign this year that includes homepage takeovers of all of the Metroland digital pages, which will also include the Pattison One Stop screens that are on at the TTC in Toronto, the residential screens and mall screens across southern Ontario. And we're looking at other options to expand this marketing mix. So last year, we received 866 media hits on over 231 media outlets across the province. That's pretty extensive, and I would guess pretty unrivaled. Certainly in the arts and cultural sector, it's completely unrivaled. Our gross marketing for the province was 70.9 million marketing impressions, and the media coverage totaled up to 68.1 million media impressions. And these are also an underestimate because, as was explained through our organizational structure, we work with a huge range of partners. Not all of them are reporting their numbers to us. And so we're very confident that the impressions and values of this campaign is actually a low ball. So looking at it from the tiers, we have the national campaign, which is valued at $652,000 and generates 111 million marketing impressions. This chart is showing just marketing, not PR. Their message is really focused on what is Culture Days, and of course driving people to the Culture Days website. Then there's the provincial level campaign that we are running here in Ontario each year. Our message is very focused on checking out activities across Ontario, really about driving people to travel interregionally. Last year, that campaign value was $150,000. It's going to be higher this year thanks to the support from OCAF. Then, as we've said, we work with over 90 community partners across the province. They also make investments in marketing and PR, and a good number of them report to us, but again, this combined total of 175,000 is an underestimate of what the full investments being made by communities in the Culture Days campaign are, and it generates 41.9 million marketing impressions. So, and then of course, individual activity organizers are also promoting their activities, but it's very hard for us to collect that data. So all these things add up to a combined Culture Days campaign valued at just under $1 million and a campaign impressions of 182 million marketing impressions. And all of them, if they're working in sync, are collectively driving the public to the Culture Days activity listings on the website and encouraging people to come out and see things. These are our digital stats. The combined Culture Days social media community, so that includes the national Culture Days social media as well as Ontario and the other provinces, is reaching now 80,000 members. That makes it amongst the top 5 social media communities in the arts sector in Canada, just behind the ROM, the AGO, TIFF, and the National Ballet. That's very impressive. And but for just Ontario last year, we generated over 300,000 impressions on our social media channels. You can see here visits to the Culture Days website last year was 176,000 visits to the website, and to just the Ontario landing page, almost 23,000. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how tourism agencies, whether you're municipal, regional, or other, can get involved in Culture Days. We pulled this up as an example. We work with the city of Thunder Bay, so we were aware of what their tourism strategy is. This is taken straight from their own website. The tourism team works to develop and deliver strategies that position Thunder Bay as a premier outdoor city, weaving together intimate connections to its natural environment and culinary and cultural attractions. So it's that really combination. And actually, we saw in a recent Porter Airlines promotion, they put it really succinctly: Thunder Bay is where culture and wilderness meet. So there's lots of great activity ideas and that could combine those two things together. And we've seen these are pulled specifically from examples across the province. Things like plein air painting trips, landscape photography or painting classes. There's been an initiative in Algoma to specifically do trips around places, famous sites of Group of 7 paintings. We've seen site-specific poetry in natural settings, heritage nature walks, foraging cultural culinary workshops, scavenger hunts of all types and geocaching, walking or biking tours of public art. We have this great photo from Dwight, Ontario, of a canoe demonstration and how they're made. We've seen lots of hunting, trapping, or fishing demonstrations. And last year, because there happened to be a lunar eclipse, we had a whole bunch of stargazing and moon gazing parties. So that happened to be a theme last year. There's no lunar eclipse this year on the Culture Days weekend, unfortunately, but you can still look at the stars. So these are just some quick examples that we came up with, but there's many other ways to really highlight the specific things you have on offer in your community and really dovetail into existing cultural strategies that you have, cultural tourism strategies. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, who's going to sum up how you can get involved in Culture Days.
Thanks, Aubrey. So here are just some ideas, and we're interested in hearing additional ideas you may have, and we have some questions for you on that in our survey after the webinar. But depending on goals and resources, tourism organizations can do some or all of the following. There's a wide variety of options that people can do, organizations can do to support local Culture Days events. So tourism organizations could distribute the invitation to participate. We have a handy one-page brochure that called the Call for Participation, which really invites people to put on activities so that we have robust, diverse activities to promote to the public to come out. So you could promote the invitation to participate through your communication channels, blogs, websites, social media. Definitely could build partnerships with our community organizers, such as municipalities, BIAs, arts councils, other local partners, to really organize on a regional or level. It would be great to have a local or regional coordinator funded to take on all of that work of scheduling, making sure things aren't happening exactly all at the same time, making sure there is time to travel from one activity to the next without like missing out on some of the next activities. So that's the kind of thing that can really benefit from a local regional organizer, just to make things smooth for people who are coming out to the activities. Or funding production costs for local regional activities so that you can support the organizers to kind of pay for material costs or pay for artist fees, things that help people be able to put on these activities. In terms of promotions, definitely you could create a Culture Days webpage on tourism sites. We've seen some great examples of that. Definitely include Culture Days on your calendars of events and other seasonal promotions. Boost municipal or arts councils' marketing budgets to produce marketing materials. It's great to have marketing materials specific to a region or community. We've seen great map guides, things that will help people get around from activity to activity. It could be a point to distribute our marketing materials, our swag. We produce each year a range of materials from venue identifiers, letting people know where Culture Days activities are happening, posters, bookmarks, balloons, temporary tattoos, stickers, buttons. So helping to get that out to the organizers to raise the awareness of their Culture Days activities. And certainly creating Culture Days Bright Spot schedule. So Aubrey touched on this briefly, but you can select all the activities in your region. You can create highlight lists. You could choose activities based on themes such as culinary activities, outdoor activities, family-friendly activities, dance. And you could promote all of these as sort of tours for people who are very interested in those different kinds of themed events. Definitely print and distribute these schedules through tourism information centers and other points of distribution in your community or region. You can link to the schedule on your website and in social media posts, and you could also use the schedule to promote one-tank trips to your region. So we're seeing we've seen some nice one-tank trips in the past, which on one tank of gas you can go do these unique things throughout our region. And again, it helps people kind of map and plan and see how they could get from activity to activity and do a number of great hands-on activities in one weekend. So we are very active on social media, as Aubrey was mentioning, our robust network. So there are national social media channels, and there are also Ontario social media channels. So do connect with us on social media, and we do our best to promote, as Aubrey was saying, hotspots. We do highlight lists. We do highlight activities. We feature different activities on different days, just trying to raise the profile of the activities. We do focus on presenting a range of activities, different kinds of disciplines, and making sure that we do make it clear that there are activities all across the province. We actually had activities in 168 cities and towns last year in Ontario, so there's a lot happening all across the province, and we do extensively use the Culture Days hashtag, which is just #CultureDays, so you can catch up with all the news that way. So definitely do tag us on your posts, and we'll help get the word out about all the great things going on in your region.
Yeah, and just before we advance to the next slide, I'd like to also say you can sign up for our newsletter by visiting the Culture Days website /signup.
Great, thanks Aubrey. So we do have a whole resource section on the website. There are all kinds of resources there to help people plan and promote a successful Culture Days activity. Particularly of interest in terms of marketing and promoting these activities is the Bright Spots personal scheduler that we've talked about, but also the customizable advertising templates. So we have templates for posters, postcards, web badges, and web banners, social media graphics, video bumpers. So there's a Culture Days intro and exit to your video if you wanted to make a little promo video. So these are customizable, free, downloadable, so you can make a poster or a postcard for your community, for your town, for your region. It can be Algoma loves culture, or it could be, Sault Ste. Marie loves culture. So they're all available on our resources section in the marketing section, and there's a wide variety of options there, and they are in all different platforms, so you'll be able to find a program that works for you. So just mentioning our public sector funders, so we are supported by the Province of Ontario through the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Ontario Arts Council, and Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund. Our corporate supporters are TD Bank, the Propeller Project, which is a foundation of the Toronto Pearson Greater Airport Authority, and Aeroplan Beyond Miles. And I believe Aubrey mentioned our media partners earlier. CTV is our national media partner, and Patterson One Stop and Metroland Media are our provincial media partners.
Okay, so that is our full presentation. It's now time for the Q&A section. As we mentioned at the beginning, you can type your questions into the question box, or you can raise your hand, and Christy will unmute you so you can say your question to us. We certainly welcome all questions about Culture Days, anything to do with what we do, as well as specific tourism questions. So maybe while we get going, I'll just I'll share the results of our earlier polls. So here's the first one. It was about do you specifically promote cultural attractions as part of your tourism strategy? And 70% said yes, but as a mix of one of a mix of key attractions. So 15% though said yes, it's our top cultural attraction, and 5% said not at all. So it's interesting, very heavily one of your key attractions. Okay, and now I'm going to do the other one. Who is your target tourism market? It was a mixed one, but very strong on international day trippers, which is a good fit with Culture Days for sure, since that's who we're aiming for in 2016. Also, a lot of domestic overnight tourists, so 45% of those, and 55% aiming for visiting friends and family. So a lot of really good fits with Culture Days, and then the lesser ones were American tourists and international tourists. So,
great. So we have a couple of questions. Our first question is how can tourism organizations get in touch with their local Culture Days organizer?
Well, the best way would be to connect with us. We will provide our contact information on the final slide, but also we'll be doing a follow-up email to you all, so you can connect with us. And as we mentioned, we have over 90 community organizers across the province. They range from people who work in the municipal culture department, sometimes the municipal economic development department, as well as even tourism ones at the municipal level, but then also community arts councils and some key organizations. So if you could send us an email that you'd like to be connected to your community organizer, we'd be happy to do an introduction.
Great. And I'm seeing another question here. Wondering if our strategy takes into account cross-border strategies.
Thanks. That's a really good question. We have a fairly limited marketing budget for the whole province. So for this first real year of our tourism strategy, we're focused on domestic and interregional tourists. However, we will have our PR company doing pitching to media that is in the borders communities. As that one example from Brock shows, that there is media across the border that is interested in covering Culture Days. It also, by focusing on sort of the domestic marketing, it frees up local budgets possibly for international. So for instance, a couple years ago, we invested in marketing in Windsor through our Metroland partnership. And that allowed our community organizers in Windsor, the city, and the Arts Council to spend some money on radio ads in Detroit and on that side of the border. So not necessarily money that we're spending, but maybe our partners will be spending on stuff across the border. Another thing that we're doing for border promotion is that those targeted highlight activity lists at the tourist information centers, almost all of which are located just across the border from the U.S.
Okay, and so our next question is wondering if we have a resource of examples of past activities that worked well in rural areas.
Yes, we do. We have a number of tip sheets and tool kits that are available in the resource section of the Culture Days website. There's a few that probably would be of interest to you. There's one called Creating a Cultural Passport that would be very useful. That one is based on the experiences of 2 rural communities that have used cultural passports for the Culture Days weekend to get people to get in their cars and drive around the area, and then as they go, they get their passport stamped, and then the passport can be submitted to win a prize. So that's one really great example. We also have a fantastic resource sheet called 100 Activity Ideas, and they can work in rural or in urban settings, but a lot of them would work really well in urban settings. They're categorized by artistic discipline or cultural sort of type of activity. So there's things for heritage, there's culinary activities. A lot of those are very rural focused. Then there's also, you know, art, visual arts, dance, etc. Catherine, is there something else that you would suggest?
Yeah, we actually did a tip sheet based on the experience of rural organizers on our task force. So there actually is a tip sheet on organizing Culture Days in rural communities, which has some great tips. And then in addition, I would mention you can search if you're just interested in finding out sort of the range of activities that happened last year. If you put in 2015.culturedays.ca as a URL, you can actually browse last year's activities. So you can select to browse by community or by region. So you could select a few communities that you think are similar to you in terms of demographics and see what kind of activities they held last year.
Great. Well, there's still a couple minutes, so if there's any more questions, we welcome that. But while we wait for any further questions, I'm going to launch our final poll, which is, would you like us to connect you with